The silence of Deep Space Station Aurelia wasn't actually silent. It was a rhythmic mechanical heartbeat of humming processors and recycled air that usually soothed Elias Thorne. But today the silence felt heavy, like a predator holding its breath. Elias, a senior logistics coordinator who had traded Earth's blue skies for the sterile gray of the outer rim, stared at his flickering terminal. The entire manifest for Sector 4 had vanished. Not a glitch, a wipe. Every crate, every fuel rod, every gram of medical supplies for the frontier colonies was now a ghost in the machine. He'd been awake for 22 hours, fueled by bitter synthetic coffee and the mounting dread that his career was about to end in a vacuum. He rubbed his eyes, the grit behind his lids feeling like glass. He had already survived 3 confrontations with disgruntled freighter pilots, including a Jovian captain who threatened to throw him out of an airlock over a delayed shipment of industrial-grade lubricants that Elias knew were actually illegal engine overclockers. The station was a powder keg, and he was the man holding the match. He stood up, his joints popping like small arms fire, and grabbed his data slate. He needed to get to Docking Bay 9. If he didn't manually verify the incoming Kaltorian diplomatic shipment, the delicate peace treaty for the entire quadrant might just dissolve into a shooting war. As he navigated the narrow, dimly lit maintenance corridors to avoid the frantic crowds of the main concourse, Elias felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. It was that primal instinct, the one humans kept even after leaving the caves, that told him he was being watched. He stopped, looking over his shoulder. Empty. Just the flickering overhead lights and the distant groan of the hull. He shook his head. "You're losing it, Thorne," he muttered under his breath. He focused on his tasks, mentally running through the list of excuses he'd have to give the station commander. "I'm sorry, sir. The most advanced AI in the galaxy decided to take a nap." "Hold on. Before we get into the real stuff, I want to know. What are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments." He reached the heavy blast doors of Bay 9. Standing there, bathed in the soft blue glow of the atmospheric shield, was a figure that shouldn't have been there. It was a Kaltorian, but not the hulking armored guards he was used to. This was a female, lithe and draped in shimmering, iridescent silks that seemed to move like liquid. Her fur was a deep midnight violet, and her eyes, large amber orbs, seemed to capture every stray photon in the room. She was breathtaking, but in a way that screamed apex predator. Elias froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't speak. He didn't even move. In the privacy of his own skull, a stray, exhausted thought flickered. Great. As if today wasn't hard enough, now I have to deal with a Kaltorian princess who probably thinks I'm a glorified janitor. She's stunning, sure, but I bet she's twice as deadly as that Jovian captain. The Kaltorian didn't look at him at first. She kept her gaze fixed on the stars outside the docking shield. Then, with a slow, feline grace, she turned her head. A small, knowing smirk pulled at the corner of her mouth, revealing the tip of a sharp fang. She didn't use a translator. Her voice was a low, resonant hum that vibrated in Elias's very chest, sounding like velvet sliding over steel. "Careful, human," she purred, her eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity. "I can hear everything. And your thoughts, and they are much louder than you realize." Elias felt the blood drain from his face. The data slate slipped from his numb fingers, clattering loudly against the deck plating. She wasn't just telepathic. She was listening to his most private, unfiltered impulses. And she wasn't finished. Elias stood frozen as the echoes of his fallen data slate died out, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like physical pressure. The Kaltorian woman didn't move to help him. She didn't even blink. She just watched him with those predatory amber eyes, her tail twitching with a rhythmic, hypnotic, slow-motion grace. Elias tried to swallow, but his throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. He desperately tried to blank his mind, picturing a white wall, a void, anything to stop the stream of panicked thoughts that were currently screaming. "She's in my head. She's actually in my head." "The white wall is a boring choice, Elias Thorne," she said, her voice dropping an octave into a purr that made the fine hairs on his arms stand up. She stepped forward, her silken robes whispering against the deck. Most humans choose the void. It's a very lonely place to hide. But your mind? It's far too crowded for that. She stopped just inches from him. He could smell her. Not the sterile ozone of the station, but something like crushed jasmine and old parchment. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Elias finally found his voice, though it came out as a pathetic croak. You shouldn't be able to do that. The Kaltorian diplomatic files, they say your species uses vocal resonance. Not this. He gestured vaguely toward his own forehead, his hand trembling. The woman tilted her head, a lock of midnight fur falling over her shoulder. A small, dangerous smile played on her lips. The files say what we allow them to say, she replied softly. Information is the only currency that matters in the outer rim. Wouldn't you agree? And right now, your mind is leaking a fortune. She reached out, a slender finger with a retractable, obsidian-sharp claw tracing the line of his jaw. Elias didn't pull away. He couldn't. It wasn't just fear. It was a strange, magnetic pull he didn't understand. In his mind, he was frantically cycling through everything he knew. Was she a spy? An assassin? Or was she actually the Princess Kalina he was supposed to be meeting? If she's the princess, I just insulted her by thinking she was a predator and a janitor hater, he thought, his stomach doing a slow roll. If she's an assassin, I'm already dead. Either way, this day is officially a disaster. She laughed then, a genuine melodic sound that lacked any of the coldness of her earlier words. I am the Princess, Elias, and I don't hate janitors. They are the only ones on this station who actually do their jobs without complaining. Her expression suddenly sharpened, the humor vanishing like a snuffed candle. But you aren't thinking about the manifest anymore. You're thinking about the ghost in the machine, the wipe in Sector 4. Elias stiffened. That information was classified. Only he and the station commander should have known about the Sector 4 data purge. How do you know about that? He demanded, his professional instincts finally kicking in over his fear. That's internal station business. It becomes my business when my dowry, 3 tons of refined Kaltorian star silk and the ceremonial blade of my ancestors, is part of that vanished manifest, Kalina said, her amber eyes flashing with a sudden cold fire. And I can hear the echoes of the person who did it. They aren't Kaltorian, and they certainly aren't human. Elias felt a cold shiver race down his spine. If it wasn't a human and it wasn't a Kaltorian, then someone else was on the station, someone invisible, someone who could delete data without a trace. Just as he was about to ask who, a massive explosion rocked Bay 9, throwing them both toward the atmospheric shield. The alarms began to scream, but through the din, Elias heard a sound that chilled him to the bone, a wet, chittering hiss coming from the ventilation shafts above them. The world tilted. Red emergency strobes slashed through the smoke, turning the docking bay into a rhythmic, bloody nightmare. Elias slammed into a storage crate, the air leaving his lungs in a painful grunt. His vision swam, but through the haze he saw Kalina. She hadn't fallen. She had landed on all fours with impossible feline grace, her silken robes now shredded to reveal a suit of matte black tactical weave beneath. Her claws were fully extended, shimmering like obsidian daggers in the alarm lights. What is that? That sound? It sounded like... Elias's thought trailed off as he looked up. In the jagged hole torn into the ceiling by the blast, something was moving. It was pale, spindly, and looked like a nightmare woven from wet bone and silver wire. A Skithra. The name flashed in his mind like a warning flare. They were the scavengers of the deep void, a hive mind species that didn't negotiate. They simply dismantled. Don't think about its name, human, Kalina snapped, her voice cutting through the roar of the depressurization sirens. She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the shadows above. Their scouts feed on cognitive electrical signatures. The more you panic, the brighter you shine in the dark. Silence your mind. Elias tried, he really did. But how do you silence your brain when a 7-foot-tall insectoid assassin is crawling out of the ceiling? It's looking at me. It's looking right at me. The Skithra tilted its head, its mandibles clicking in a sickening rhythmic pulse. It ignored the princess. It wanted the buffet of terror radiating from Elias. It coiled its spindly limbs, preparing to spring. Suddenly, Kalina was a blur of violet and black. She didn't run. She launched. She collided with the Skithra midair, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. The screech that tore from the creature's throat wasn't a sound. It was a psychic spike that drove Elias to his knees, clutching his head. He felt his nose begin to bleed. The mental feedback was like white-hot needles being driven into his temples. She's fighting it. She's actually winning, Elias thought through the agony. He watched as Kalina pinned the creature against the bulkhead, her claws sinking deep into its thorax. But then, his blood ran cold. He saw the vent behind her. Another one. And another. 3 more Skithra were pouring out of the shadows, their multifaceted eyes locked onto the princess's exposed back. "Kalina! Behind you!" Elias screamed, not just with his voice, but with every ounce of mental energy he had. He didn't care about shining in the dark anymore. He needed her to hear him. He grabbed a heavy kinetic wrench from the floor, his knuckles white. He was a logistics officer, not a soldier, but if these things took her down, the station was lost. The princess spun just as the first scavenger lunged. She parried the blow, but the weight of 3 more sent her skidding across the deck. She was fast, but she was outnumbered. Elias didn't think. He didn't plan. He just charged, swinging the heavy iron wrench with a desperate primal roar. He caught the nearest Skithra in what looked like its knee, feeling the satisfying crunch of chitin. The creature hissed, turning its terrifying gaze toward him. For a second, Elias looked into those cold alien eyes and saw his own death reflected 1,000 times over. But then a strange calm washed over him. It wasn't his own. It was a cool, soothing wave of violet energy flowing from Kalina. "Good strike, Elias." Her voice echoed in his head, clearer than ever. "Now, stop thinking. Just feel the rhythm of the hunt." Before he could ask what she meant, the floor beneath them buckled. The Skithra weren't just here for the cargo. They were sabotage specialists. They had targeted the gravity stabilizers. As the station's simulated down suddenly became up, Elias found himself falling toward the ceiling, while the Skithra used their hooked limbs to stay anchored. He was floating, helpless, in the air, while a predator closed in for the kill. Gravity didn't just fail, it inverted. Elias felt his stomach lurch into his throat as the floor fell away, replaced by the cold, metallic ceiling of Docking Bay 9. He flailed, catching the edge of a recessed light fixture as he slammed into the top of the room. Below him, or above him now, the Skithra were scuttling along the walls like silver spiders, their hooked appendages making a sickening clack-clack-clack against the plating. They didn't need gravity. They were built for the void. Elias looked down, his knuckles white as he clung to the light fixture. Kalina was gone. For a heartbeat, panic flared. Did she fall into the venting shafts? Is she dead? But then he saw her. She was crouched on a horizontal support beam, her violet fur bristling. She wasn't falling. She was hunting. She looked up at him, her amber eyes glowing with an ethereal light that seemed to pierce through the smoke and the strobe lights. "Stop dangling like a worm on a hook, Elias." Her voice rang in his skull, sharp and commanding. "The gravity stabilizers are cycling. You have exactly 12 seconds before the down becomes sideways. When it shifts, leap for the emergency manual override on the pylon to your left. If you don't, we'll both be crushed when the centrifugal force resets." Elias looked at the pylon. It was 10 feet away. In 0G, it was a simple push. But the station was groaning, the metal screaming under the strain of the sabotage. "I can't do this," he thought, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I'm a logistics guy. I track crates. I don't do mid-air acrobatics while alien bugs try to eat my face." "You are human." Kalina's voice softened, becoming a warm, steady pressure in his mind. Your ancestors hunted mammoths with sharpened sticks and crossed oceans in wooden tubs. Do not tell me you cannot jump 10 feet. I can feel your heart, Elias. It beats with the rhythm of a survivor. Now go. The gravity buckled again. The station gave a massive, shuddering heave. Elias let go. For a second he was weightless, drifting through the chaos of floating debris and shimmering star silk. A Skithra lunged at him from the wall, its mandibles snapping inches from his leg, but a violet blur intercepted it. Kalina had leapt from her beam, mid-air, spinning like a bladed top. She slammed into the creature, driving it down into the darkness of the lower levels. Elias hit the pylon hard. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he scrambled for a handhold, his fingers finding the recessed manual lever. He yanked it. With a mechanical roar that drowned out the sirens, the stabilizers slammed back into alignment. Gravity returned with a vengeance. Elias fell 3 feet onto the real floor, landing in a heap. The Skithra that had been stalking the walls weren't so lucky. Caught mid-scuttle, they were slammed into the deck by the sudden restoration of 1G. Elias looked up, gasping for air. Kalina stood over the broken remains of the lead Skithra, her chest heaving. She looked at him, and for the first time, there was something other than predatory amusement in her eyes. It was respect. "Well jumped, human," she whispered in his mind. But the moment was short-lived. The station's external sensors began to blare a new, even more terrifying tone. "Kalina," Elias wheezed, pointing at his shattered data slate which had flickered back to life on the floor. The Sector 4 wipe. It wasn't just a distraction. They didn't just delete the manifest. They deleted the station's targeting parameters for the defense grid. Outside the thick viewing ports, a Skithra hive ship, massive, organic, and bristling with jagged bone spikes, was dropping out of warp, and without the targeting data, the station's massive cannons were just pointing uselessly into the dark. The void outside the viewport wasn't empty anymore. It was screaming. The Skithra hive ship looked like a rotted, skeletal hand reaching out to crush the station, its bioluminescent pores glowing with a sickly, rhythmic green. Elias watched, paralyzed, as the station's massive point defense turret swiveled aimlessly, tracking ghosts in the dark. Without the Sector 4 targeting data, the most powerful weapons in the quadrant were effectively blind. "They aren't just here for the cargo," Elias whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "They're here for the station. We're the only deep space relay between the core and the rim. If Aurelia falls, the frontier is cut off." Kalina stood beside him, her shredded silks fluttering in the recycled breeze. She looked at the HUD on his cracked data slate, her amber eyes scanning the scrolling lines of corrupted code with terrifying speed. "The data isn't gone, Elias." Her voice hummed in his mind, resonant and steady despite the chaos. "The Skithra don't delete. They consume. They've pulled the targeting subroutines into their own local organic network to mimic our signatures. They are wearing our own defense codes like a shroud." Elias looked at her, his brow furrowed. "If they're mimicking us, then the only way to lock onto them is—" He stopped, his heart skipping a beat. "We need a physical handshake. Someone has to manually ping the hive ship from outside the station's shield. We have to tell the station's AI. That thing right there, that's the target." He looked at the EVA lockers at the far end of the bay. They were dented, scorched, and half-buried under fallen debris. To reach them, they'd have to cross the open floor, which was now a graveyard of twitching Skithra limbs and slick, iridescent blood. And he could hear more of them. The chittering in the vents was growing louder, a tidal wave of bone and hunger descending from the upper decks. "You are thinking about the odds again, human," Kalina purred, though there was a sharp edge to her mental tone now. She stepped over a fallen support beam, her claws retracting into her fingertips as she reached for a discarded pulse pistol. "The odds are irrelevant when the alternative is extinction. I will hold the bay door. You must be the one to shake hands with the nightmare." "Me?" Elias stammered, his hand going to his chest. "I'm a logistics coordinator. I haven't been in a vacuum suit since the academy. Why can't you do it? You're faster, stronger, and, well, telepathic." Kalina turned to him, and for a split second the predatory mask slipped. He saw a flicker of ancient, weary wisdom in her amber eyes. Because I cannot interface with your station's primitive 0-1 logic manually, Elias. It requires a human biometric override. The AI knows your heartbeat. It knows your rhythm. It will trust you. It will not trust me. She shoved the pulse pistol into his hand. Her touch was cold, but it sent a spark of adrenaline through his veins that burned away the exhaustion. She leaned in, her muzzle inches from his ear, her breath smelling of jasmine and ozone. "Careful, human," she whispered aloud, her physical voice vibrating through his very bones. "Don't let them hear your fear. Let them hear your defiance." She spun around, firing a burst of blue plasma into the vent above. A Skithra fell, screeching, followed by 3 more. The hive was here. Elias turned and ran for the EVA suits, his boots slipping on the star silk. He didn't look back. He couldn't. He had to trust that the Kaltorian Princess could hold back a tide of monsters with nothing but a stolen pistol and a hunter's heart. He reached the locker and tore it open. The suit was an older model, bulky and smelling of stale air. As he scrambled into the pressurized leggings, a massive thud shook the bay doors. Something big, much bigger than the scouts, was trying to get in. Elias fumbled with the helmet, his lungs burning. "Elias." Kalina's voice echoed, fainter now, as if she were focusing every ounce of her strength on the fight. "They are through the first seal. You have 90 seconds before I am overwhelmed. When you step into that airlock, do not look at the stars, look only at the target. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," Elias gasped, locking his helmet into place. The HUD flickered to life, showing his oxygen levels and a blinking red prompt. Manual targeting engaged. He stepped into the airlock, the heavy inner door hissing shut behind him. He was alone in the cramped metal coffin. The outer door began to cycle, the red warning lights bathing him in a crimson glow. His hand hovered over the release. One push, and he'd be staring into the mouth of a god. The airlock hissed, a predatory exhale that sucked the last of the station's recycled warmth into the void. As the outer door slid open, Elias Thorne was met not with silence, but with the terrifying, silent scream of the cosmos. Below him, the massive hull of Station Aurelia curved away like a steel continent. Ahead, the Skithra hive ship loomed, a jagged mountain of bone-white chitin and pulsating green veins. He was a speck of dust floating toward a hungry god. "Magnets. Engage," Elias wheezed, his voice sounding thin and metallic inside his helmet. His mag boots clanked onto the outer hull with a jarring vibration that traveled straight up his spine. He was walking on the skin of a titan. Every step was a battle against the vertigo of having the entire galaxy below him. To his left, the station's defensive turrets were still twitching, their massive barrels tracking nothing, blind to the Leviathan closing in. "Elias." "They are in the bay." Kalina's voice flickered in his mind, strained and static-heavy. He heard the muffled thrum of a plasma discharge and a sickening, wet screech. "The lead Ravager. It's massive. I am running out of charges. Do not look back." The handshake, human. "Now." Elias scrambled toward the manual targeting pylon, a slender needle of titanium poking out from the station's spine. He could see the Skithra hive ship beginning to glow. It was charging its primary beam, a bioelectric pulse designed to short out the station's life support. If it fired, everyone on Aurelia would be dead before they even felt the cold. He reached the pylon and tore open the maintenance panel. His fingers, bulky in the EVA gloves, fumbled with the data cable. Come on," he hissed. He plugged his suit's HUD directly into the station's nervous system. A flood of red warnings filled his vision. Targeting data corrupted. Manual acquisition required. He looked up, centering the hive ship in his reticle. It felt like pointing a flashlight at a mountain. "I have to hold the lock," he realized. "The station AI needs a steady biometric signature to verify the target. I have to stay here until the guns fire." Suddenly, the hull beneath his feet vibrated. Not the steady hum of the engines, but a rhythmic thud, thud, thud. He turned his head slowly. Emerging from the shadows of a nearby sensor dish were 3 Skithra void stalkers. They were smaller, sleeker, and equipped with serrated limbs designed to shear through pressurized suits. They didn't need air, and they didn't need gravity. They were built for this. Elias, behind you. Kalina's psychic warning was a scream that nearly made him black out. He didn't have a weapon. He only had the pylon. He braced his back against the titanium needle, watching as the first stalker launched itself through the vacuum, a silent silver arrow aimed at his throat. He closed his eyes, centering his thoughts on one thing: the hive ship, the target. He poured every ounce of his will into the HUD, screaming mentally at the station's AI to see what he was seeing. The stalker's claws scraped against his chest plate, tearing a shallow groove in the reinforced plastic. Alarms began to chime, suit integrity at 80%. The creature pulled back for a killing blow, its mandibles wide, revealing a throat that glowed with toxic green light. But then the pylon beneath Elias's hands began to hum, a deep subharmonic vibration that shook his very marrow. The station's AI had accepted the handshake. Target acquired, biometric lock confirmed. "Eat this," Elias whispered. The massive point defense cannon just 20 meters away roared to life. In the vacuum there was no sound, only a bone-jarring shockwave that sent the stalkers tumbling into the void like discarded toys. A bolt of pure white energy, thick as a skyscraper, erupted from the turret, lancing through the dark and slamming into the heart of the Skithra hive ship. The explosion was silent and beautiful, a blossoming flower of fire and debris. But the recoil was immense. The shockwave rippled through the station's hull, snapping the pylon like a dry twig. Elias felt the world spin as he was hurled away from the station, his mag boots losing their grip. He was drifting. No tether, no ship, just him and the endless freezing dark. Spinning. The universe was a kaleidoscope of cold stars and jagged, burning wreckage. Elias watched as the station grew smaller, a glittering jewel of human defiance receding into the obsidian sea. His oxygen alarm was a frantic, rhythmic chime, 6% remaining. The silence of the vacuum was absolute, pressing against his ears like a physical weight. He reached out a hand, but there was nothing to grab, just the infinite, hungry dark. So this is it, he thought, his breath coming in shallow, jagged sips. A logistics guy, lost in the mail. At least the manifest is clear now. He closed his eyes, waiting for the cold to seep through the suit's heating coils. Suddenly a warmth bloomed in his mind. It wasn't the warmth of a heater, it was the heat of a sun, a violet sun. Did I not tell you, Elias Thorne? Your thoughts are much too loud for the void to swallow. A shimmer of iridescent light cut through the black. A Kaltorian diplomatic shuttle, sleek and shaped like a hunting spear, banked hard toward him. Its underside bay doors were already cycling open. As the ship drew closer, Elias felt a psychic tether wrap around his consciousness. A mental anchor that stopped his mental tailspin before the ship even reached him. He was hauled inside by a pair of massive Kaltorian guards, but they stepped aside immediately. Kalina was there, her tactical suit scorched, and her violet fur matted with Skithra ichor, but her amber eyes were blazing with a triumph that was purely primal. She didn't wait for him to remove his helmet. She pressed her forehead against the reinforced glass of his visor. "You stayed," she whispered directly into his soul. The hive ship screamed as it died, and through its agony, I heard only one thing: the steady, stubborn rhythm of a human who refused to let go. Elias wheezed as his helmet finally hissed open, the rich, jasmine-scented air of the shuttle filling his starved lungs. He looked at her, a weak but genuine smile tugging at his lips. "I told you. I track shipments, Princess. I don't like losing cargo, especially not a whole station." She laughed, a low, dangerous purr that vibrated in the small cabin. "The High Council will want to speak with the man who shook hands with a Skithra god, but for now, the manifest is restored, your station is safe, and I believe you owe me a tour of the Sector 4 vaults once we dock." Elias leaned back against the bulkhead, watching the stars through the shuttle's viewport. For the first time in his life, the silence of space didn't feel lonely. It felt like a conversation. The galaxy is a big, dark place, and sometimes, the only thing keeping the nightmares at bay is the sheer, stubborn will of a human who doesn't know when to quit. If you enjoyed this journey into the Outer Rim, make sure to like this video and share it with your fellow space travelers. It helps us keep the lights on here at the edge of the universe. And if you want more tales of human grit and alien wonder, hit that subscribe button for HFY Soundscape. We've got plenty more stories where the humans prove that we might be small, but our thoughts can change the stars. Until next time, stay curious.